Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I would like to welcome you to the third lecture on a series on research methods. Today we will be talking about an extremely important aspect of research methods, which is how to select an outlet for your research publication. We have talked about this concept in the first lecture, that it is extremely important to publish your research. If you do not publish your research, no one will know what have you done so far, and others will not know where to begin their research. So today's lecture is titled Where to Publish Your Research. And in this lecture, we will be talking about different publishing outlets. We'll be talking about rankings, journals, books, book chapters, and conferences. Major outlets include books, book chapters, journals, and conferences. Before we choose an outlet for publication of the research material, we have to think about this criteria. This criteria includes ranking of the journal or the conference, different organizational preferences, future requirements, personal preferences, field-specific requirements, and impact factor of the research publication outlet. I will start with journals. Journals are considered foremost research publication outlets, and one of the major reasons is their extensive peer review process. We should remember that this peer review process does not happen overnight. It takes a lot of time in the peer review process, and even when the paper has been accepted, you might not be able to get your paper published in the next issue. So you might need to wait. So therefore, journals usually have a lead time of several months and several years. In addition to that, journals have very low acceptance rate. An acceptance rate means for every 100 articles submitted, they might be accepting maybe 10, 20, or maybe even 3 or 4 articles. So acceptance rate is also important before you decide on sending your publication to a journal. The next point is timeliness of research publication. In journals, that timeliness is not assured. And one of the major reasons is that peer review, that extensive peer review process. We should remember that whenever we select a journal for our research publication, it might take a lot of time before we can actually get it published. Another important concept is ranking of the journals. All journals are not considered equal. Some journals are considered more prestigious than others. There are different mechanisms for ranking a journal, and I have given detail of one of those methods. For example, this Intercollegiate Studies Institute, ISI, performs ranking of different journals in different types of fields. And in that ranking, they have their own criteria. That criteria includes a lot of factors about a journal. Some of those factors are citation count. Citation count means number of times articles from that publication have been cited this current year. The next criteria is article count. Total number of articles published this year. And this is needed because some journals are published quarterly, some journals are published annually, and some journals are published fortnightly, probably every 2 weeks. So a journal being published every 2 weeks will have a lot more articles, and there is a lot more chance that the articles being published in that type of journal will be cited more. So we need to compensate for the number of publications of a journal in a year relative to number of citations from that journal. Similarly, impact factor. Impact factor is called frequency of an article's cited life, cited half-life, age of majority of article references, how long an article has been referenced. And citation means when someone else conducts research, and if that person uses or builds upon your research, that person cites, that person gives reference to your research. So how many times an article is being cited is called citation. So cited half-life means age of majority of articles being referenced. Some articles are referenced over and over again, maybe even 10 years after they have been published, they still have a lot of value in them. They'll keep publishing, they'll keep citing. On the other hand, some articles may not be cited after a year of their publication. So half-life will vary. Similarly, last important factor that I have included here is immediacy index, which means how quickly an article is referenced. So for example, if a journal has issued its new issue last month and another journal is accepting articles this month, and a researcher is using an article being published last month in submission this month, its immediacy factor will be higher. So these are a few different criteria on which journals are ranked. So whenever you decide on sending your publication to a journal, you should consider whether your publication needs to go in a top-tier journal, or a second-tier journal, or a third-tier journal. Here are some examples of these rankings. This is sorted by ISI impact factor. For example, in these journals, the top journal becomes ACM Computer Surveys. ACM Computer Survey has been cited 1,731 times this year, but its impact factor is 7.4, and usually cited half-life of the articles being published in this journal is 7.3 years. Similarly, bioinformatics, MIS Quarterly has been cited 2,395 times this year, but its impact factor is 4.978. But the cited half-life is greater than 10 years. An article being published in this journal gets cited more than 10 years after its publication. So this type of journal will be considered an extremely important journal, and this constitute top-tier journals. Let me give you another example. IEEE Pattern Analysis. This has been cited 13,053 times, but its impact factor is 3.8. Even though it's being cited more, its impact factor is still low because of the other factors. Maybe this journal has more frequency of publication compared to MIS Quarterly or ACM Computer Surveys. Similarly, but this is not the only ranking mechanism. There are other mechanisms as well. And depending upon the field, these rankings will vary. For example, this list was for computer science. A closely related field is information systems, or MIS. In MIS, journals are ranked differently. For example, in this ranking, MIS Quarterly becomes first. And if you look at this, this is one mechanism of ranking a journal. This is the second one, third one. So here are a lot of ranking mechanisms. And overall, in this ranking, an average has been taken. So you can see that according to this mechanism, MIS Quarterly was second in the list. But according to all these type of mechanisms, it was one. So on average, MIS Quarterly becomes the top tier journal in MIS. We move on to the next publishing outlets, books. You can publish your research in the form of a book. And there are a lot of benefits attached to it. First of all, publishing research in books has different meaning for different organizations. Some organizations value it higher than others. So for example, if you're working in one university or one research organization, They might consider publishing a book a very prestigious thing compared to another organization or another university where publishing a book is not a big deal. So depending upon the organization where you work or where you will work, you have to decide whether to publish a book or to send your publication in a journal. Look at this one. Usually it takes a lot of time to get published, and therefore knowledge published in books is relatively old. Similarly, timeliness of research publication is not assured. An important aspect, peer review process is not mandatory. You might get your book peer reviewed, but publishing a book does not require peer review process. And we know that one of the important aspects of research is peer review. So this is one of the reasons that books are not usually considered important or a preferred way of publishing your research. Nonetheless, books are important. Another mechanism would be book chapters. Usually book editors solicit researchers for book chapters, and they maintain some level of peer review process. However, this peer review process is not as extensive as journals. In journals, usually there is a concept of blind peer review. A researcher will not even know who is actually reviewing their research. So there is a level of transparency. However, in this case, when we are publishing book chapters, that transparency is difficult to maintain because you know who the editor is. Importance of book chapters vary from organization to organization, just like it varied for books. And since it takes a lot of time, timeliness of research publication is not assured. So we have seen that starting from journals, which is considered the most prestigious outlet for research publication, to books and book chapters, timeliness is difficult to assure. So what do we do if we want to report our research immediately and want to get feedback from other researchers? The best mechanism in that case would be a conference. Conferences are a very important avenue of presenting, publishing, and peer reviewing research. This is a kind of double peer review process because, first of all, in most conferences, you will be reviewed by someone before presenting your research. If you are accepted, when you are presenting your research in a conference, everyone attending your presentation is a reviewer. Their questions, their guidance will be an extremely important resource for further research in the field. And I have seen a lot of researchers who go to conferences to get that feedback. But again, importance of presenting in a conference vary from organization to organization. Some organizations consider it very prestigious to attend a conference and present in a conference. Similarly, there is again ranking of conferences. All conferences are not the same. Some conferences have acceptance rate of less than 4%, even stricter than some of the journals. But those type of conferences are considered very prestigious. There are international conferences and local conferences. Similarly, due to direct peer review while presenting, conferences become an extremely important avenue for publishing and presenting your research. Importance of presenting in a conference varies from organization to organization, as I discussed earlier. This was the discussion on how to select an avenue or an outlet for publishing your research. Now we will be talking about how you will select literature for your research to build a case for your research method. In this literature review, you have to consider these things: selecting a problem, reviewing literature, and then writing the literature review. Usually, research starts with an idea. It leads to research questions. And that leads to research hypothesis. We had discussed earlier that a hypothesis is a tentative answer to the research question. Before you do anything else, you have to do literature review so that you understand, you have confidence on what others have done in that field. Here's another diagrammatic representation of this process. So if we have to make it a flowchart, we'll describe it that we need to define an idea in as general terms as possible by using journal sources. We'll be talking about what these general sources are in a minute. Then we will search through secondary sources. Then we'll search through primary sources. We'll organize our notes and then write a proposal. So we have to follow these steps before we can even start conducting our research or start applying research method. Literature review provides greater confidence in selected topics because it lets you know what others have done, and it provides researcher with new ideas and approaches not previously considered. If you do not review literature, how will you know what others have done, what approaches others have used? So this is an important aspect where we have to make sure that we understand what has been done in the past and what has not been done in the past, so that your research is important and significant. It identifies individuals conducting research in a related field, and these are those individuals whom you may want to contact for review or for their guidance because they have already published in that area. It also gives you ideas concerning research method and their designs in similar studies. And it may reveal sources of data unfamiliar to you because a lot of data might have already existed. So you might not need to collect data, you might just need to analyze the existing data. It may introduce you to measurement tools that work effectively. And it may also reveal problems and methods of dealing with them. Similarly, it may help you interpret and make sense of your results and help you relate your results to work of others. Now, once we know what is the importance of literature review, let us talk about what are the elements of literature review. These elements include reports of studies of closely related problems that have been investigated in the past, design of study, including procedures employed and data gathering instruments used, populations that were sampled if it is a quantitative research method, and sampling method employed. You will also try to find out extraneous variables that could have affected the findings of previous research, variables that were defined in the literature, faults that could have been avoided, and recommendation for further research. This is where we start our own research. There are some pitfalls to avoid. Remember, you may need to change your first idea. Similarly, don't pick a trivial project. Don't try to do more than what is possible. Try to do something new. And don't fall in love with your idea. So if we avoid these things, we can assure that our research is flexible and that it's doable. If you remember, research being doable was one of the important aspects of research method. Similarly, we have to define our interests. Personal experiences or first-hand knowledge might give us some idea of where to start. For example, if we want to understand how programmers program or how new tools of programming impact productivity of researchers, of programmers, we need to start right there. We can go to the professor and ask them if they have some idea and think about what has not yet been asked. That will be an extremely important mechanism where you will be able to find out the research idea. Here is an example. Idea is, open classroom and academic success. Problem could be, what is the effect of open versus traditional classrooms on reading level? So this was the question. A research hypothesis could be that children who are taught reading in an open classroom setting will read at a higher level grade than children who are taught reading in a traditional setting. So what was the process? We came up with an idea, we raised a question, and we tried to answer that question tentatively. This answer is hypothesis. And we understand that hypothesis is an educated guess. This hypothesis doesn't come from sky. This has to be grounded in theory, in literature, what others have done based upon that. Now you will follow the next process. You might want to design an experiment in which you have two groups of students, one type of students going through an open classroom setting and the other group of students going through traditional classroom environment. And then you compare the results of the same teaching material at the end of the course or at the end of that experiment. Or you might already have these type of classes, traditional classrooms and open classrooms in different schools or universities or colleges. You might simply go there and collect data with a questionnaire. So it will depend on your interest and depth of the knowledge or depth of the research process that you want to employ. Different sources of information. There were three major sources of information. The first one was general sources. What it does is it provides an overview of a topic and provides leads to where more information can be found. And examples include daily newspaper, news weeklies, popular periodicals, magazines, trade books. These type of things are called general sources. They should only be used to develop an idea. Once you have developed an idea that that's the area that you want to research, you go on to secondary sources. They provide level of information once removed from the original work. For example, books on specific subjects and reviews of research. After refining your idea, then you move on to primary sources. And what are these primary sources? Journals, abstracts, and scholarly books. And what this does is it contains original reports of original work or experiment. The next one is how to use general sources. General sources provide a general introduction to topic area and some clues about where to find more information. Internet is an important general resource, but be cautious about it because internet is currently an unmoderated and unregulated media. So internet is good for fun and having ideas, but be cautious in the use of those resources that you get from internet. You should make sure that resource is reliable enough. Secondary sources. Secondary sources provide scholarly summaries of research, and they have references to more sources on a particular topic. How do we use primary sources? Primary sources provide reports of original research. And we understand that journals are the foremost resource for this type of original research reports. Now the question is, why are journals the best sources? We have already discussed this in the previous section of this lecture, that we select journals for our publication outlet because they are considered more prestigious because of their peer review process. So same goes here. Journals are important because of their peer review process. Experts review the article and make recommendations. And many submitted articles never get published. Only those articles get published who have done something really innovative, something new. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the fourth lecture in this series next week.